Hello and welcome to God and the Family, a series where I, Gershly Karen Pierre, speak about biblical concepts and tie that into our population, our families, our communities, and of course, our God, so that we can help make better sense of our place in this world and what I perceive would be God's ideal society for us. I stated in previous God and the Family my interest in increasing the frequency of this series from once a week to twice a week, but if I were to change my mind, to let you know, and I decided to keep this at once a week, so this should be expected every Sunday at once a week. Keep in mind that even if I were to post on Sundays, it does not stop the frequency of the other posts or the nature of this series. I'm going to be looking at the New International Version of Ecclesiastes 9:9, because the King James Version, while I tend to go to it, it may not convey the depth of what I believe this specific verse means to the average reader. And it states, "Enjoy life with your wife, whom you love, all the days of this meaningless life that God has given you under the sun. All your meaningless days, for this is your lot in life and in your toilsome labor under the sun." So the NIV words it as meaningless, whereas the King James Version words it as vanity, but I believe the point is that much more potent in the NIV. However, it still stands that when it comes to this existence, it may at times appear meaningless, and especially depending on our dispensation. I mean, there were eras I don't even think we got to live. And to be frank, I feel like our demographic has been held back. Like, you know how when you hold back a student a year and then they have to start over again until they pass the test? We have been held back for however many centuries at this point. And we don't have the power in this current frailty, in this current status, to really position ourselves in ways that can jump from A to Z, not on a collective basis, and certainly because we are missing a lot of components, psychologically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. Thus, we can't be expected to contain, like other collectives who should be expected to, with all the grooming they've been doing, to become at the level they're in. We can't be at that level currently. But what we can do, I believe, are inside of our control. It may not be the grid, so to speak. It may not be the infrastructure. It may not be material resources. But I believe that if we can discipline our lives in the areas that actually do have our power, that's a lot more power than we think. Too much has been taken from us as a demographic to the extent that we are not in the best position in life. And as a result, we may not be able easily to take those things back. I mean, even our dignity at a point was taken. But I find it interesting because the one thing they did not collectively take from us is our ability to procreate. It's our ability to find a mate within ourselves and our ability to form family governments within ourselves. Thus, that area of life, being it that it is domestic, it may not be as comprehensive as other areas, but it is still massively important because that's the power over our people. That's the power over our existence, and we need that power. So I believe that this verse is speaking to utilizing what is in our control, what is in our power, even in the eras of vanity. And that eventually, in my viewpoint, these things can change. But for now, what is our emphasis, and I believe our focus should be in the family. It should be in finding a spouse and building our infrastructures. Think of it this way. Your spouse, your family, is your personal government. And like a government is in charge of the infrastructure, the laws, the mandates, the resources of its given nation. Well, our families, if we want to consider it like our governments, then we can be in charge of the laws, the resources, the perspectives, the vantage points a lot. We can really mend our population in ways that we know other groups don't care about, and that we know we can do for the good. We've done that throughout history. We've taken the little and we've turned it into something really great. Now we have to do that, but particularly speaking with the family. Not just how people can take their talents, but now we need to take our resources, including ourselves as a resource, and pull it back into ourselves. Because there's so much, for example, brain drain and other draining that's happening of us as a people, of us as a resource. We need to replenish ourselves. That's what I believe we need to do if we can enjoy the sentience of each other in ways where we actually feel they are valid. If we can enjoy their sentience in ways where we actually feel they are meant to exist, then we are able to help them feel a sense of peace. I believe how we treat others can be our incentive. It could be our benefit. We need to learn to make it so that we make each other's lives easier so that they can lend themselves as a resource to us, so they can give themselves unto us so that we can thrive. We don't have to make it more complicated than it is. Let's let the outside influence and the outside factors be the complications we face. But if we work towards empowering one another and taking care of what is in our control in a way that is rising each other to the next level, I believe that makes it a whole lot easier, because that's your domestic front. You may not be able to deal with the external, but the domestic is the closest thing to you. That's what you wake up into. That's where you spend most of your time. That's where you have your life. Your most vulnerable moments, your most personal moments are spent in your household. So we need to concern ourselves over the sanctity of our households first and mostly. That's always been in our control, but it's time we learn to see it that way. I have some questions with this specific verse and what we can learn. What if we made entire industries based on the power that we can control? And by industries, it doesn't have to be the literal definition, but just making a system of regulated patterns of behavior, things that actually learn to benefit us for a change. That if we saw ourselves as resources and we used ourselves as resources, used each other as resources, how we can then conform us to a higher standard, and that creating ways of life that actually benefits us. That's our industry. That's our economy. That's our focus. We are our resources. We are our governments. So what if we were to put more emphasis on the areas that we can control? Because everything else at that point is toil. It's labor, as this verse says. But what we can control, which I would think is your household, your spouse, that should be our influence. What if we chose to be more strategic with how we create marriage and families? But strategic in a wholesome sense, we're not trying to deny ourselves order, but we were strategic and considerate in a nuanced tone of our lived experiences. How much more difficult are we making life by not being aware of each other's frailties? So this video is about the idea of using the only power you have for your benefit and then allowing that power to consume you and then become bigger than the things that you don't have. I believe we make things way too complicated by not seeing the aspects in our control, because the other aspects are toil and labor and essentially meaningless and vanity, since they're not areas we can have rulership over. But we need to know we are a people, and that as a people we are meant to be in control over our very lived experiences, and everything else, since it doesn't have direct influence over us, it shouldn't be taking our time, mind, and energy. That's all I have for today's God in the Family. Thank you so much for listening. Stay tuned for more.